All right, today we're diving into a really powerful idea from the book Nudge. It's this realization that these tiny, almost invisible changes in our environment can totally alter the choices we make every single day. Let's see how this works. So let's start with this simple question. Could the way your lunch is arranged actually change your life? I mean, really think about that. Could the order of the food in a cafeteria have a big enough impact over time to affect your long-term health? It sounds a little crazy, but it's the perfect place to start our story. Okay, so let's meet Carolyn. She's in charge of food services for a huge city school system. And one day, she decides to run this little experiment with a friend. Here's the key. They didn't change the menus at all. They just moved the food around in different cafeterias. So in some schools, the desserts were right at the beginning of the line. In others, they put the carrot sticks at eye level instead of, say, the French fries. And the results? Whoa, they were staggering. Just by changing the layout, that's it, no other changes, Carolyn could shift what kids ate by as much as 25%. Think about that. She wasn't just dishing out food. She was shaping thousands of daily choices with this hidden but incredibly powerful influence. And suddenly, this discovery lands her with a massive dilemma. I mean, what do you do with that kind of power, right? Should she arrange the food to make the kids as healthy as possible? Or maybe just arrange it randomly? Or should she try to figure out what the kids would choose anyway and just mimic that? Then you've got other pressures, like maximizing profits, or even suppliers offering her money to put their items front and center. The big realization here is that trying to be neutral just wasn't an option. Every single arrangement had an effect. So here's the bottom line. She has to pick some arrangement. See, doing nothing is impossible, because even the way things are right now is influencing choices. There's just no neutral ground here. So, what is the right thing to do? And this whole situation brings us to a really core concept from the book Nudge. It turns out Carolyn's role has a name. And what's interesting is it's a role a lot of us play without even knowing it. She is what's called a choice architect. So what's a choice architect? It's basically anyone who has the responsibility for organizing the context in which people make decisions. Every little detail of that context, from how a room is laid out to the way a question is worded on a form, can influence the final choice people make. And once you start looking for it, you see this role is everywhere. A doctor explaining different treatments to a patient, yep, choice architect. A parent laying out the options for college, choice architect. The person who designs the ballot for an election, the manager who creates the form for your employee benefits, even a salesperson. They're all designing an environment where we make decisions. And this leads to probably the most important takeaway for anyone in this role. There is no such thing as a neutral design. It just doesn't exist. You can think of it like an architect designing a building, right? They can't create a neutral space. Where they put the stairs and the doors will always influence how people move through it. Well, the same is true for choices. Every design, whether you meant for it to or not, has an effect. Okay, so if influencing people is unavoidable, what kind of principles should guide someone like Carolyn? Well, the book proposes this guiding philosophy that, I'll admit, sounds like a total contradiction at first. Libertarian paternalism. Let's break down what that actually means. Yeah, libertarian paternalism. I know. Those two words sound like they absolutely do not belong in the same sentence. But the idea is pretty clever. It's about taking the best parts of both ideas and putting them together. Okay, let's look at the two sides. The libertarian piece is super simple. People should be free to do what they want. You're not blocking any choices, you're not banning anything, you can always opt out. Easy. The paternalism part is where it gets interesting. It's the idea that it's okay for the choice architect to gently steer people toward an option that will make their own lives better, and this is key, as judged by the people themselves. So it's a soft paternalism, one that always preserves your freedom to choose. But wait a minute. Why do we even need this kind of steering? I mean, don't most people make pretty good choices for themselves? Well, that really depends on a fundamental question. Are we perfectly rational beings, what economists like to call econs, or are we, well, what we really are, humans? So traditional economics has this idea of Homo economicus, or econs. These are beings who can think like Albert Einstein, have the memory of a supercomputer, and the willpower of Mahatma Gandhi. They always make perfectly rational choices. But in the real world, we're Homo sapiens, we're humans. We have trouble with long division, we forget our spouse's birthday, and yeah, we get hangovers on New Year's Day. We're prone to all these mental shortcuts and biases that cause us to make predictable mistakes.
And it's exactly because we're these fallible humans, not perfect econs, that a little helpful nudge can go a long way. So that brings us to the big one. What exactly is a nudge? Well, the book's definition is pretty specific. A nudge is any aspect of the choice architecture that alters our behavior in a predictable way. But, and this is the important part, it does it without forbidding any options or significantly changing the economic incentives. So, putting fruit at eye level, that's a nudge. Banning junk food entirely? Nope, that's not a nudge.
And if you want a brilliant and kind of funny example of a nudge in the real world, we have to go to the men's room at Amsterdam's Schiphol airport. So the people in charge there had let's call it a spillage problem, and their solution was pure genius. They etched a tiny, super realistic image of a black fly into each urinal. And what do you think happened? Well, it turns out it gave men something to aim at. And this tiny, basically zero-cost nudge, which, remember, restricted no one's freedom, reduced spillage by an incredible 80%. That right there is the power of a really good nudge. Okay, so one of the most powerful tools in a choice architect's toolkit is something that taps right into our natural human laziness, or inertia. It's the power of the default option. You know, what happens if you just do nothing at all? I mean, just think about your cell phone. The manufacturer set a default for everything. Your ringtone, your background, your notification sounds. Now be honest, how many of those did you actually change? If you're like most people, probably not many. We just have this massive tendency to stick with the status quo, even when the stakes are super low. Now, let's take that same idea and apply it to something with way higher stakes, like a retirement plan. Let's say Janet contributed $1,000 last year. If her company's default is status quo, that contribution just keeps rolling over automatically. But what if the default is back to zero? Then she has to actively sign up all over again. You can see right away how that one simple choice made by the company, the choice architect, could have a massive, massive impact on Janet's financial future. So when you put all this together, the cafeteria experiment, the power of defaults, you get to what is maybe the book's most important conclusion. And it's that the debate isn't really about if we should nudge people or not. Because the first and biggest misconception is that it's even possible to avoid influencing people's choices. It isn't. Just like Carolyn in her cafeteria, some arrangement has to be chosen. Some default option has to be set. Nudges are a constant, unavoidable part of our lives, whether they're designed on purpose or just by accident. So the real question we should be asking isn't if we're being nudged, but how we're being nudged. As you go about your day, I want you to start looking for them. Who are the choice architects in your life? And what choices are they nudging you and me to make?